been looking at this old vintage antique homemade buzzsaw up in the barn for, I don't know, approaching 20 years now, thinking, boy, maybe someday I'll get this thing going again. So I figured what better time to do it than right now. So I'm just pressure washing this thing, cleaning it up.
I thought this would be the perfect time to use my, I forget what this thing's actually called, but it's from Harbor Freight, and it should, there we go. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. This thing will be much easier to work on at a higher height. So I will work on this thing just the way it is right here. So first things first, what I want to do is get this old motor off. I know a lot of people are going to be pretty disappointed in that, and it kind of pains me to do this. This old motor, this thing is so well made, and there is so much compression in this thing. Once it gets to one spot, and it's like, I feel like the rope is going to break. There's so much compression in this old thing. So my dad said that this thing has probably less than 10 hours on it, if that. And it's just a shame. But here is the new motor that I have, just a 79cc one from Harbor Freight. And I will probably bolt that thing right up to this thing. And hopefully the mounting and stuff will all be the same, but if it isn't, I'll take that plate off and I will probably, that'll get painted red. This wood I might just stain another color, or just get new spruce or whatever wood that is. So let's take this old motor off.
So really what got me started on, or I guess lit a fire under me to kind of get this buzzsaw going again is a purchase. I don't know when it's going to be happening. I keep hinting about it. Hopefully this winter at some point. But this and something else go just about hand in hand when you are cutting logs. How about that? That's all I'm going to say. So I'm just unbolting the motor here.
So let's do an unboxing of the 79cc horizontal shaft gas motor from Harbor Freight. We do not have this motor. This is the first one for me. I'm trying to find you an item number, which is 69733. This is literally the first time I have opened this box. So there's our manual, and I counted of different manuals I have from Harbor Freight. I have like 40 manuals, something like that, 45. So I'm pretty sure I probably do not have to read the directions on this, but I might anyways. So this must have a different mounting configuration for this motor. And it looks like these outside holes here and here will fit on the buzzsaw here. And indeed they will. So that's good. I won't have to do any drilling there. Here is the spark plug wrench for the spark plug on this thing. And it also comes with some bolts I see in there too. Pull the foam out, and there's the motor. So I am pretty pleased about having a brand new motor on this thing. The old motor is, well, it's not, I can't really find parts for it, and not that I can find parts for this thing either, but this is a brand new motor that hasn't been sitting for, oh, I don't know, 50 years, 40 years, something like that. So there should be, and there is a keyway on the shaft. And they always try to keep the shafts here with greased up, just for the simple fact that they don't want them rusting before the customer gets them, which makes sense. So here's a little chart thing that is to, I guess, quick start guide. So these motors are pretty much all the same from Harbor Freight. You know, the fuel cap on top, the muffler, this is the choke, and the air filter's in here. There's a little throttle in here. The engine switch is over there. This is the pull rope. The oil fill cap you can't see over here, and the oil drain is on the other side also. So just pretty much add oil and gas it up, choke it, make sure it's on, and pull the pull rope. So here's some more specs on this motor. You guys can read that at your leisure or pause the video. So I guess I'll bring you guys in closer for a look at the motor itself. So this thing has a pretty teeny tiny little gas tank, maybe a quart if I had to guess. Pretty decent sized muffler. There's the choke I was talking about. So that is run and that is start. Pretty simple there. And no tools required to get into the air filter. So actually, let's open up this and see what air filter this thing has. Lots of threads on these screws. Oh, and they do come out, so they're not captive, which is kind of a, I guess it's a good and a bad thing maybe. But you can see this, there is the fuel line right here. This is the governor linkage. This is the throttle, so that is wide open, and this is idle. Boy, not much throw on there. That's wide open, and that's at idle. Now it's got a foam air filter, pretty standard stuff. And there's a look inside. So the choke mechanism and stuff all goes in there, and I will probably oil up this air filter when I first use this thing. But all in all, you know, this thing looks pretty good. Gas cap's a little tight. And is this one just like the other ones? No. Okay, so there is, the gas cap does not stay with, you know, there's no little chain or something in here. And Harbor Freight has put a little screen in here. I can't quite get it out with a full thing, or a level to tell you when the gas tank is full. So that is a good thing, and I would recommend that you follow what they say for full in this thing, because since these motors are black, what will happen, they're so sealed up in here, if you overfill this tank and there's not enough of air in here to be compressed, what will happen is this motor will fill up the crankcase with gas. It'll flow through the carburetor and leach through and go into the crankcase itself, and you definitely do not want that to happen. I wish this thing had a fuel shutoff, and I don't see one, although I could put one right here. That would not be very difficult, and it's I think that's why Harbor Freight put this fuel line here, so if someone wanted to, they could put in a shutoff. So I might put one in there anyways, and then whenever I go to store this motor for a long time, I can just shut it off here and run the motor dry. So this is all pretty standard stuff. There is the on-off switch, so that is on and that is off, and the pull rope feels pretty good. They've improved their handles from the old ones. And this is the business end of things. This is the oil fill. And I see it looks like they have ran this a little bit. There's a little bit of oil on here. So that's good. That means that this motor passed and everything. You see the famous blue lines on here. You know, the blue marks and stuff. So this is the shaft that pulley hopefully will fit on. Oh, and it's too big. Oh man, that's a bummer. Hmm. Well, looks like I'm going to have to buy a new clutch for this thing. Oh well. There's our valves. This is an overhead valve engine, and this was where the other oil fill was. So that's that. And there is a drain. Drain is on the other side over here. Yep. There's a drain plug at the bottom. And pretty standard stuff there. And another tag for that's your emissions control. So here's what the motor looks like. Spark plug wire. This is a crankcase breather here. And the spark plug, yep, is right down in there. Right there. So I will probably go over this motor a little bit and make sure all the bolts and stuff are tight, that the spark plug is tight, and then let's put some fuel in this thing.
Unfortunately, I figured out after positioning the new motor in its same position right here where these boards are, I figured out since the old motor was a vertical shaft, or sorry, a vertical. The piston has a vertical travel. It goes up and down, and this Harbor Freight one it goes at a 45, so the motor is wider than the old one was. So it's it's just the way it is, I guess. So unfortunately, I had to make some new mounts for this thing and get some new boards to fit this engine here. This is where I figured out, well, it's not going to fit between there. So what I end up doing is welding on a bed frame to the bottom of this thing, which is just basically angle iron. And I have to say, I think this buzzsaw is made all out of homemade stuff. I don't think this was a kit. There was no remnants of a tag anywhere on it. Nothing on the blade. Nothing anywhere on any of the steel, or no, like there was no holes drilled somewhere where the tag would have been. So I definitely think this thing was homemade. A farmer or something probably just made this, and it's sat up in the barn ever since. So I thought this was a pretty neat thing to kind of resurrect, I guess. And you'll see here shortly, I will be welding some angle iron to the bottom of this thing, and that will allow me to put new pieces of wood on the bottom, and then I have something new and sturdy and whatnot to mount the motor to. But I've got to say, it's really a good thing to keep scrap metal all around, scrap metal laying around. For instances like this, I had all this stuff laying around on hand. It didn't cost me a thing. And I actually got the steel bed frame. That's all this is that you use. I think it's the older style beds. They use this steel. And it's pretty thick and strong, and it makes a great material, a great cheap and or free material to use stuff like this for. So really, it's nice having access to that at some point. So I'm just using mine. This is a 90 amp flux core wire welder that you guys have seen in so many other videos. Here we are using it again just to weld these pieces of steel on. Now I will say the bed frame is actually quite difficult to drill. You have to have a pretty sharp drill bit, and I found that an 1/8 inch drill bit works pretty good for punching a hole through steel, and then you just work your way up to the bigger bits from there on out. But the 1/8 inch one is good for starting things. So now I've got to say, whenever I was running this thing in the beginning of the video, so this blade that's on here creates a lot of air movement. There's a lot of air moving around this thing, and I am not kidding whenever I say this. I could feel the air coming off of this blade if I stood in line with the blade. I could feel the air coming off of this thing from about 5 feet away. So This saw is definitely not something you want to be using when you have hoodie strings on, you have real baggy clothes. You might even want to roll up your sleeves to run this saw because there's so much momentum and inertia in that blade when this thing is spinning. It is unreal how long it takes for it to slow down. Well, you guys saw it there in the beginning of the video. So what I'm doing here is I am cutting the boards from, this was actually a Colorado blue spruce tree. I remember cutting these trees down, and I actually milled this lumber myself. I did not buy this lumber. This is true, I think it's 1 inch. I don't know, it's a 1 by 10 or something, 1 by 12. It didn't cost me anything. It was milled from the property, so I think this is pretty neat to use. And this is it. You guys will see here shortly, whenever I start putting some finish on it, how nice it will make the finish will make this wood look. These, for whatever reason, the Colorado blue spruce trees, all pretty much every one of them is dead around here. And it's just like the ash trees. Something came through and wiped them out, all of them, or the majority of them. And there's might be a few stragglers here and there that are still alive, but that wood from that tree, since the trees were dead standing for a while, the wood on the outside turns a very cool looking. That's not really an orange. It's like a yellow. You have a dark yellow on the outside and then a lighter yellow that the wood turns. So it looks really cool, and I like the look of it. I don't know that I would want it on, on an entire wall in a house, but for something like this that really adds a really nice punch to things. Now, I will say you guys probably will not see another video on this buzzsaw for quite some time. We live in Western Pennsylvania, and it's November here. So I think tomorrow or Tuesday's high is, we're having a really bad cold snap, is maybe 20 degrees, or the low, I think the low is like 15. So it's really, the cold temperatures are here. So I can't be painting stuff this time of the year unless I have a really warm day. But you can see the how the finish brings out the colors of the wood. That is, I bought this finish actually at Ollie's for, I think it was $3.99 for a quart of it. I mean, it was a really cheap price, and it's like a marine varnish. Supposedly is a very tough finish and waterproof and everything and outdoor. And it's I'm hoping it's going to work good for this stuff. I've never used it before on this, and I think it's made by, I don't know if it's Minwax or uh, there's another company out there that makes it. I'm not real sure. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but yeah, that finish makes that wood look really nice. I really like the way it looks. So those will get mounted to the bottom of this thing, and then the motor will get mounted next after that, and I'll put the belt and stuff on. Now, look at that. Oh, that looks so cool. But I've got to repaint the steel on this thing. I want to prime it first, and then I also want to, I'm thinking red. I'm not real sure. The other tool or machine I guess I'd be buying is green, or that I'm looking at buying is green. So I don't know, maybe I could paint this thing green. I'm not real sure. But I kind of like red. We have a lot of red tools, red tool carts, red tractors, red barn. So I guess I'll maybe stick with the red coloring. So here I am, finally getting around to mounting this thing. And I've got to say, you never really realize how long it takes to restore something like this. People that restore cars, and mechanics and stuff, I have so much respect for you guys out there that are doing that, doing stuff like this, because you have literally had to replace or fix or a refinish or whatever the case may be, rechrome pretty much every part of that vehicle, and it's amazing how much time and effort it takes to do something like that. And here I am just refinishing a couple boards and repainting this thing. It's just it takes an awful lot of time to do this, but hey, it's worth it. It's all worth it in the end, and it really makes for a very very cool conversation piece. I know some people are probably looking or they're probably thinking of me now, going, "Boy, this is a little on the different side," but hey, that's all right. I paid, I think it was about $99 for that motor. I could not find a coupon for the engine that I'm using to repower this thing. I just I couldn't find one, so I ended up paying, I think it was around $100 for the motor. And then the clutch, there's a centrifugal clutch that goes on the crankshaft of the motor. So whenever I idle the engine down, it the clutch disengages in it, and then it lets the blade free spool down so that I can keep the motor running without the blade spinning. And then whenever I want to cut a board or something, what I can do is I'll just throttle up the engine like you saw in the beginning of the video, and that'll get the blade spinning again. So I've noticed I have to have the blade, not the blade, the belt on this thing very tight. So I'm probably going to, I think I have to buy an inch shorter belt, and I'm hoping that that's going to do the trick for keeping the belt from slipping on this thing. And I guess if it doesn't, I might have to build another, I don't know, something to put tension against the belt so that it won't slip. And I'm pretty sure it is slipping on the clutch side, so that's actually going to heat up the clutch, which is not something that I want. The clutch has springs and stuff, and what'll happen is if you heat it up enough, I mean, it'll take the temper out. So that's just another little bump in the road that I have to work my way through. But I'm persistent enough. I'll get around to it when I have time. So again, I'm just drilling these holes, and I bought all new. I think I bought all new nuts and bolts and everything. And the unfortunately, this buzzsaw, so the nut that secures the blade on, when you would start cutting something, it will want to unthread the blade, and I do not want to have this blade come off of this thing and fly at me. So what I had to do was drill through the nut and the shaft on this thing. So the nut that is on this buzzsaw is a 2-inch nut. It took a 2-inch socket to tighten everything, or to loosen it off, and then it took that same 2-inch socket with my big impact wrench to put the nut back on and tighten it. So that was interesting, and I ended up having to put a bolt the whole way through the nut and the shaft itself, so that I could run this thing without worrying that the blade was going to come undone. And it could fly off. I mean, it'd probably stay on there, but I don't really want to find out. The blade on this thing, I'm sure some people are wondering, it is, I think it's around 19 inches across. So it's, what, 5 inches away from a 2-foot blade. And you're not messing around with a small, a circular saw blade now. This is a big, ginormous blade that's on this thing. So, but what I was using my tape measure there for was trying to get a belt length for this thing. And I think what I'm going to do is keep that old piece of steel that the motor mounts to, and that will get painted red along with everything else on this buzzsaw except for the blade itself. So now what I'm doing is I am running a tap in the engine here. That is for the drain plug. And what I want to do is, as you can see, I'm making a mess, but getting oil and stuff all over the place. What I'm doing is I'm putting a drain on this thing with a little valve on it to make the oil changes much, much, much easier. It's changing the oil on these engines from Harbor Freight. They're not the easiest to change the oil on because you just pull a plug and the oil basically goes everywhere. So I don't really want to have that happen, and I just plumbed this out to the over the edge, and it should I should be able to drain the oil in this thing without spilling any. Now filling it up, that's another problem, but I'll deal with that a little bit later. That's easier to get to than the drain plug. So you can see the new clutch I have on there, and I'm just finishing up the drain. And I bought a brass valve for this thing, and that was not cheap. I think that was like $20. Like, man, it's all the little things that start to really add up in restoring something like this. $100 for the motor, 50 for the clutch. So there's 150, probably another 30, maybe 30. Yeah, probably around 30ish for the drain. So that's and then another, I don't know, $10 for the belt. So we're at least $200 there that I have in this thing already, and that doesn't include the gas, the oil, and painting this thing, and also my time to restore it. But I wanted this thing done, so that's what it's gonna take. But I'll tell you, this thing is really cool, and I hope this video does kind of well on YouTube. We'll see. Time will tell. But I hope a lot of people view this thing. I know this is a very, very long video, and there's kind of a lot to go over with. Now I'm not sure if this thing has Babbitt bearings that are in this for the shaft. I don't know if it has that or these are actual ball bearings that are in this thing. But the shaft up top is greasable, so I am able to grease this buzz saw and make this thing pretty much last indefinitely and forever as long as I grease it and don't spin a bearing and whatnot. So here I am going over everything on the motor, just making sure everything is tight. And unfortunately, I had to remove the muffler to take the spark plug out of this motor. So I was not very happy about that. That is not something that's very cool that I had to do, but hey, it is what it is. And I mean, really, how often am I going to take the spark plug out of this thing? Not very much. So let's see this thing run for the second time.